Today, I have one of my very good friends, a colleague, a mentor, and a partner in this journey, none other than Mike Montoya. We shared a lot of roots together from New Mexico. We always say New Mexico to the world. We have some of the best security professionals from New Mexico. Today, I'm honored to introduce Mike Montoya. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the inclusion.
Mike, can you introduce yourself?
Michael Montoya. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer here at Equinix. Been in the industry 20 plus years in a variety of roles, but predominantly security. Working at companies at Microsoft most of my career, spending a number of years with FireEye and helping on that journey, especially as we were innovating the sandboxing technology and really changing the tone of how security is addressed in boardrooms and other areas. And now for 3 years have been the Chief Information Security Officer here at Equinix. Also sit on the board of F5 and most recently another company called Signia.
So Mike, thank you for being with us today. So, you have an amazing journey. First, we all started in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, right? We joke around. Jamil started in New Mexico. You started in New Mexico. I started in New Mexico. We can go on that list. So walk us through your journey, Mike. If I go back and look at your career in the last 22 years, one, you started in a place that nobody knows, right? A lot of people ask us, is New Mexico part of the United States? And we have to remember them. We are a state in the US, and they don't realize we have the two best national laboratories who focus on mission critical stuff in the United States. So given all that stuff, the background, the way you were brought up, first, STEM is not a core in New Mexico, let alone cybersecurity. I'm sure 22 years ago, you had to figure out, what do I want to be when I grow up? So can you walk us through your journey, because it's very inspirational. And this month being a Hispanic Heritage Month, and also this is a great inspiration for several minorities to really think STEM as a career, and not only STEM, but cybersecurity as a career. The floor is yours, Mike.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, first, Viva Nueva Mexico. So absolutely, right? We love New Mexico. My family obviously has a long history there, and I know we share a long history there, Doctor. The state itself, culturally is one of the most beautiful states, in my opinion. Right? I'm a little biased, but I think it's an incredible place, from the people to the food to the geography. And as we both know, we're not only is it Hispanic Heritage Month, but it's also the International Balloon Fiesta Month, which is a phenomenal time in Albuquerque, which is the largest hot air balloon festival. So just a brilliant place, and we're incredibly fortunate with our laboratory infrastructure there, right? With the federal R&D labs there, which actually got me into cybersecurity, but not in the most traditional routes, which we'll talk to. But we have this incredible infrastructure of technology and technology innovation that happens out of New Mexico, which is, we're very fortunate in that state for that. But unfortunately, and the reality is, that doesn't translate to academia as well as it should, especially in the primary and in some of the more earlier childhood and education phases of New Mexicans' lives. Me personally, I'm kind of the accidental CISO, to be really transparent. I actually have my background is actually economics and political science, which led me to do some work to do technology mining within the labs of New Mexico, which inevitably led me to a position at Microsoft, where I started in the networking division at Microsoft. And because of my operational background and some of the abilities I had around operations, I became a natural fit to take on some leadership roles in the carrier space and in the networking space as Microsoft was growing its internet presence. Now, keep in mind, these are still dial-up days. These are days when Microsoft was building its dial-up backbone, and I got asked to help lead a number of different initiatives for Microsoft in that space. And it was during that time where security itself wasn't really a discrete function yet. It was really very much still part of the networking divisions, or maybe traditional IT type functions. And so security was under my remit, but the reality is our focus was a lot more still on availability, right? So how do we get availability out there of the network? How do we get the performance working? But what I started to recognize very quickly is how much security was interrupting both performance and availability. And it was becoming a stronger issue of my ability to keep networks going at the pace that we needed to at Microsoft. So that's where it was, and this was probably the early 2000 timeframe where I started to lean more into the security side of my job versus the networking and availability side of my job and the more traditional IT part of my role. And that passion just continued to grow as the more curious I became about security, the harder I realized this problem was, and recognizing as well that this is a problem that's just going to continue to get harder and harder, which I think we all have experienced now. It led my curiosity naturally down this space, and I had a natural appetite for it. And so it wasn't necessarily the most traditional route to get to where I'm at, but I've always had this love for learning. I've had this love for assurance, and I think a lot of those passions came together with security that helped me do the role I'm doing today.
So, from your journey, Mike, it's amazing to see where you started, where you are today. In the past, you helped people in the front lines. Today, you are on the front line, right? I mean, you are the world's largest data center. You are the world's largest data peering today. I mean, the brand names like Zoom, the banks, the governments, I mean, everybody uses your data center and your fabric to move data. I mean, how is it? I mean, how do you feel? What do you do today? What keeps you up every night?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so thank you. I mean, we take a tremendous amount of, 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 of sincerity when it comes to that our customers are our number one priority. And that's what's, I think, built what this company is all about. And, in another topic, we could talk about how I came to Equinix as a customer originally, even before the company went public, and looking at the vision of what they were trying to do, to how that has materialized over the years, and how that's expanding now that the edge is becoming more real. Cloud neutrality is becoming more important, and all the things that are changing as it relates to infrastructure. And Equinix has a very strong voice as well as role in how the entire industry has shaped and formed. But at the core of it all is the fact that this is a very customer centric company, and we believe in transparency, we believe in trust, and if those are your core fundamental principles, which they are for us, then security just becomes very natural in terms of it has to be a priority. And whether it be how are we doing certain compliance activities, and how much can we share with our customers on how we're achieving that, our own cybersecurity programs and how we're doing that, how we develop code, and how our products really take a secure by design approach, and how do we drive that transparency to our customers so that they can have greater assurance that the risks they're transferring to Equinix, the reliance they're expecting from Equinix, all of that is something that they can rely on, not only in terms of what we say, but we can demonstrate daily on how we do it with them. Because we very much look at the fact that, hey, these are not just 10,000 customers. I look at it very much, there's 10,000 CISOs out there that rely on me and the team to be an extension of their team. And we take that role very seriously. And it all comes back to the fact that this company is very much about trust and transparency, starting from our board, as well as our leader, Charles, our CEO, who demands us to take this stake every opportunity we get.
You're a big supporter of STEM, right? A recent example was you drove down to Socorro, New Mexico to meet with a rising seniors class, right? A class of 40 bright engineers. You literally went down, you spent your time in the classroom, and you brought in some speakers to address the class. You're a big believer in that. What are your 2 cents from a STEM perspective? And what is that you expect your peers to do more?
Yeah, listen, so you asked the question of, what keeps me up at night, and that's really what keeps me up at night is, we have a major gap in talent in this industry, and you hear from everybody. I mean, it's not just a US gap, it's across the globe. And we've seen this rise in this challenge for some time. At the end of the day, without great people, it's tough. And it's just the bottom line, right? Great people create great products, they create great intelligence, they create great automation, right? Which helps us do our jobs better. But at the kernel of all of that is great people. And we have a big challenge in this space. And I put a lot of focus on, how do we get that next generation of security professionals to help us close the gap on our talent, but also to bring us some of the diversity that we need. Back to the diversity topic, right? This is an area that has a tremendous demand on people thinking differently. And that's at the essence what diversity is all about, is like, how do you bring people with different ideas, different thoughts, different perspectives to the table so that you can get a much better view of solutions and how you can address problems. And so not only do we need more STEM people, but, specifically, I think is, again, back to Hispanic Heritage Month, how do we reach out to groups today that we don't traditionally reach out to? Women, we don't have enough women in this field. We do not have enough, specific minority groups or different ethnic groups into this field that are this tremendous addressable space for us. And the question becomes now, what are we doing as leaders to go and actually make an impact to draw more people to this space of cybersecurity that can help us have greater diversity of the diversity of mind, right? The diversity of thinking. And how can we bring more of that to this discipline? And I think all of us in a CISO position have that responsibility and needs to be part of our charter, not just, hey, how do I fill my headcount right now, but how am I helping fill this industry gap that we're dealing with? And I think there's a great opportunity for us because given, I believe, and I truly believe this, and I say accidental CISO, but the reality is when I was a kid, I used to pretend I was this international spy all the time, right? And I've always had this natural fascination to this space from a very young age. And why not? This is one of the most exciting spaces you can be in. It's never there's always a new problem to solve. It's got, a little bit of international and it's got mystery in general to it, right? Which is kind of, which is it piques a lot of curiosities. It's tech oriented, and it's got a lot of non-tech elements to it as well, right? Tons of governance, which is becoming more about our role, policy, influencers in different political pockets that don't necessarily just require good tech skills. There's a lot of diverse skill sets that are required in this space, and the talent is out there. We just have to find a way to get that talent excited about this space and show them natural paths to get in. And STEM is definitely a start.
A final question. You're a big believer in inclusion because I've seen that in every journey of yours, not just minorities, but you give a chance to some brightest women in this country, right? I mean, I had a personal chance to talk to some of your interns from amazing schools. You take time to not only bring them on an internship, but to introduce them to some of the great people in the industry. So what's your view on inclusion? And I mean, you being a minority, you always had to raise to the occasion, and it was 3 steps harder, right? So what's your departing comments from an inclusion perspective?
I mean, inclusion is absolutely, you can't have diversity without inclusion. And, the example for me is that, you can have diversity as a statistic. Okay, I've got this number of people sitting in a room or that I've hired, et cetera. I've ticked the box. But if people don't feel included and feel empowered to speak their voice, to contribute, to do those things that really help solve problems, then you don't really have diversity, in my opinion, because diversity is not just an inclusion metric that, hey, we've got X number of Hispanics that we hire. But where are you hiring those Hispanics? What leadership positions are you putting them into? And it's not just a Hispanic thing, it's females, it's across the board. People need, in order to feel safe, in order to feel like I belong, like I matter, That's part of that inclusion piece. It helps when you see people who look like you. It helps when you see people who have similar backgrounds as you, and you can start to relate. And, for me, that was something I didn't see a lot of growing up. In fact, most people thought I was from a different part of the world. when I did walk into a room, they didn't think I had, Mexican roots or even American roots for that matter, to be really honest. A lot of times they thought I was from South Asia or Middle East or somewhere else, which is fantastic. But I think that's also a function of the fact that there wasn't a lot of people like me from New Mexico or with a Mexican background in this field. So people just never really thought to associate me with that. And that's a challenge, I think, right? Because then now what that did for me is, I did feel like I had to work harder. And sometimes I was a little quieter than I should have been because I felt like I just needed to fit in a little bit, right? And if I stood out too much, then, maybe they'll figure out something that I don't want them to figure out, I guess, right? And that's part of that true inclusion piece that, sometimes I didn't always feel included, even though I was certainly diversity there. Wasn't always felt like I could be included because I didn't have people to relate to. So now, the reality is it's not just about, hey, can I hire X number of people, but, are you putting people in these positions where, they have influence, they have authority, they have empowerment, and really giving people the opportunity to feel like they have more than themselves that they can relate to in the organization. So I'm a big believer. I sit on a number of different board initiatives, whether it be Black board initiatives, women board initiatives, Hispanic board initiatives, to really start to show that, hey, we've got to hit this at the leadership level and get the right mix of leadership that can really not just demonstrate diversity, but create the inclusion that's really required to make diversity be powerful. But I think where I'm not putting enough time, and I plan to spend more of my time, is if we look at this as a supply chain issue, right? How are we getting back to the STEM piece as well? How are we looking at different cycles of how people get to a boardroom position, whether it be in all the way down to early childhood development, to early learning, to getting into university, and then moving into the corporate world and expanding there, or political world, or whatever world it is from an industry that you're involved in. How can we start to shift left? We call it in security, right? How do we shift left on this problem and start to look at how do we get more supply in the system so that we can get more folks into boardrooms and leadership positions that can represent more than just a specific demographic. And that's a thing that I think all of us need to put some more time into.
So thank you, Mike. It's an honor to have you on our series. Stay tuned for the continuation of this amazing series. We promise we'll bring you not only the diversity, but the inclusion. We're going to have some of the best minds come and share their journey and what they can contribute back to the society. Stay tuned.